Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Buffalo Plus channel on YouTube. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hey, we've got our friend from Miami back with us again to talk about the Dolphins, Will Manso. He's a sports anchor at Local 10, WPLG, also one of the co-hosts of the Miami Sports Pod with Clay Ferraro. Will, welcome back to Buffalo Plus.
It's good to be back, and I'm glad I'm doing it in a week where this game matters. It's a pretty big deal down here in South Florida. It's not just another matchup with the Bills. It's important.
I love that it will become a rivalry again because, you know, that's what the AFC East needs. The Bills, it's been strange. They always thought that New England had become a rival, but they never really were because the Patriots beat them every time. But I think the way it's starting to shape out, regardless of what happens on Sunday, is I think those Bills and the Dolphins have separated themselves from the other two. So let's talk a little bit about what we saw out of the Dolphins this past week. There hadn't been a lot of games like that. What were your impressions of where they were and how that game ended up?
I mean, well, look, I put it this way, Mike. I know you've been covering the Bills a long time. I've been covering the Dolphins for almost 24 years, and I've lived in South Florida since 1985. I moved here when I was 10 years old. So I caught the Dan Marino era, and then I started covering the Dolphins at the end of the Marino era. So as a kid, I lived the Marino years, and then I've covered the post-Marino years. And all I can tell you is I haven't seen a game or a performance like that from a Dolphins offense since Dan Marino. And that's not to say Tua Tagovailoa is Dan Marino. You know, that's not what we're here to talk about. Just the offensive ability in general in a time where offense matters so much, where you have to score points to win in this league. The Dolphins finally seem to have formed themselves an offense and put weapons around Tua. And I know we'll talk more about Tua, but all the discussion has been about him, the player. Well, to see what he can be as a player, you got to get him weapons. And I think what became clear on Sunday and what's pretty clear now with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki, Raheem Mostert, Chase Edmonds, the additions that have been made on top of what they had, is the Dolphins have some ability to be explosive, and that's something they haven't had in a very long time.
Yeah, let's talk about Tua the guy, because we had heard a little bit at different times from Brian Dabel. You know, he was with him in Alabama, and just how highly he spoke of him as a person. And it seems to me, and we talked a little bit about this the last time you were on, he's had to deal with a lot as the Dolphins quarterback. Do you think watching that game a little bit almost seems like a microcosm of what he's dealt with, you know, where there's a lot thrown at him, it's down. I mean, look at what happened, the coaching staff and leaving and the ownership and Tom Brady and all that mess. And he just seems to stay with it and stay the course. And in this case, overperform what anybody would have thought.
Yeah, I think resiliency is the word that comes to mind. And part of it, I think, is his background. You know, I think anybody who knows Tua through his days at Alabama, maybe watched his documentary a bit, knows that he came from a family that, you know, the background of his Simone family is very tough. I mean, they're, you know, very proud, works hard. His father's his role model, but certainly he'll admit it. Tua will tell you it wasn't easy. He was the toughest coach he ever had, you know, in the way, the things he expected. And I think part of that toughness and rough exterior is from that. So he can deflect a lot of things. But as you know, Mike McDaniel said, he's only human and he hears things and sees things no matter how much he wants to say he doesn't. And I think at some point, I think Tua this year has gotten to the point where his personality and demeanor has changed to like, you know what? I'm going to stand up for myself. I'm not just going to deflect and act like nothing bothers me. I'm going to use that motivation to show people I'm a good football player and I can make plays. So I think to your point, you know, we've seen a lot about the growth of Tua as a player, but I think mentally, I think being able to handle the mental side has really changed. And part of it too, Mike, is the fact that he's got a coach who believes in him. The last couple of years, he's had, is it Ryan Fitzpatrick? Is it him? Like you mentioned, is it Tom Brady? Mike McDaniel has said, I have Tua as my quarterback, and my job as the head coach of this team is to bring out the best in Tua. And if I don't, that's my failure, not Tua's. And I think that attitude and that support has helped Tua a lot on top of his teammates supporting him as well.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned that about Fitz. Of course, he's obviously a very popular guy still in Buffalo, but it was a thing for a while. I mean, you've got this veteran guy, and they're sort of in and out of the lineup. Again, Fitz spoke very highly of him, but he also had the Deshaun Watson rumors and the Brady rumors. I don't think I've ever seen a guy drafted where he was, in the position he was brought in, that's had to deflect from so many different angles of them always looking, it appears, to replace him.
Yeah. And look, and you look around the league, I know that the league has changed in the sense that quarterbacks, even first round picks, top 10, top 5 picks, you've seen it now more so than in the past that teams move on quickly.
Yeah.
But in Tua's case, I feel like they were moving on after they drafted him. Like he didn't even get a grace period. It was like, you're supposed to be the star from college, top 5 pick. Immediately, everybody compared him to Justin Herbert because Justin Herbert was taken right after him. Justin Herbert had success right as a rookie. Tua didn't. The whole back and forth, we've mentioned some of the names. I don't feel Tua ever got a fair shot. And it's not my job to defend Tua, and I don't think Tua wants anyone to defend him. I just think it's just laid out there. Things have not been easy for him the way they've been set up. And I think the obvious comparison is you look at a Josh Allen, who comes to the league. You knew that he needed seasoning. You knew the talent was there. He just needed seasoning and coaching. And look what happened. Patience paid off, and he's one of the best players in the NFL, maybe the MVP of the league this year when it's all said and done. So I think Tua hasn't gotten that fair shot. Now, that's not to say Tua can reach that level. I don't know if he can. But I will say this, you got to have support. You got to have a push from the organization to say, hey, you're my guy. We're going to do everything in our power to have you succeed. And then if you don't, then you kind of got to look in the mirror and say, maybe I'm not the player I was supposed to be.
Yeah, it's interesting with Allen. Sometimes the road to get there gets sort of wiped away. I mean, Josh came in as a rookie. He wasn't supposed to start. Halfway through the first game, he's starting. It was a bad team, and he survived that year. Comes out the next year, plays better, gets him to the playoffs, has a bit of a meltdown at the end of the playoff game. They lose in Houston. Mm-hmm. He still hadn't thrown for 300 yards 2 years into the league in a game. And I remember he got voted one of the top 100 players in the NFL. And Bills fans got all worked up because Mac Jones made the list towards the bottom of the list. And I'm thinking, when Josh got put on that list, I didn't think he deserved to be. I didn't think he was that player. He wasn't a top 20 quarterback in the league at that point. He had talent, but he wasn't that quarterback. And then it really clicked for him, and he took off. And he had consistent support from his head coach, from his offensive coordinator. So it's a different ride. Now, physically, they're different guys. I mean, they just are. Yeah. But we've seen different quarterbacks physically do just fine in the NFL. There's a different way to get there.
Absolutely. Yeah. You look at the previous era of quarterbacks, the Manning brothers, the great quarterbacks of the last, let's say 15, 20, even Tom Brady, physically they're a more imposing 6'3", 6'4", the prototype. But then you could look at a guy like Drew Brees, who's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And we've seen either Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's one of the best quarterbacks of this generation. There are different ways to do it. It'd be great if every quarterback had the skill set and the size of Josh Allen. It just doesn't work that way. But that doesn't mean you can't win with a different quarterback. And I think that's that's also the fault of Dolphins fans too. Like Dolphin fans just think they want Dan Marino again. And it's like, you're not going to get Dan Marino again, but you may get a quarterback who helps you win a lot of games. And in the end, that's all you really want.
Yeah. And if you want him to be good, just like it happened in Buffalo, you get him a Stephon Diggs. In your case, you get him a Tyreek Hill to go with Jalen Waddle. And I would say you could make the argument the Dolphins have the best wide receiver pair in the NFL. If they're not number one, they're right up there. What has Hill, and we've seen a lot of them with the Chiefs and how he's really, really hurt the Bills, but what has he done for Tua so far?
It's funny you mentioned that too, Mike. Watching the Monday night games, I saw the parallels in a bit, like Jalen Hurts, who was at Alabama, and he struggled a bit the first year or two, a lot of questions similar to Tua. And they go out and they get him A.J. Brown after drafting Devontae Smith. Tua after drafting Jalen Waddle, they go out and get him Tyreek Hill. Josh Allen, you go out, you get Stephon Diggs. When you got a guy like Gabriel Davis, you look at the way those things, the parallels there. When you put weapons to a quarterback, especially studs like the number one receivers we just mentioned, it makes a world of difference. And for Tyreek Hill, I obviously knew about Tyreek Hill, the player, and we always, we'd watch games, you'd see what he'd do with Patrick Mahomes, but not until you really see him in person do you understand how fast he is. I mean, he's just incredible, and he changes the game. And you have a guy like Jalen Waddle as a rookie, had over 100 catches, set a rookie record for a season. All of a sudden, the attention he's drawing, when Tyreek is drawing attention, it just opens up the field. I mean, and all you have to do is hit those guys in space somewhere, and they make something happen. It's not like these are contested catch guys. These are, you throw the ball. You saw the 2 long touchdowns to Tyreek Hill. It's not like the Ravens didn't say, hey, we got to cover that guy. They just lost him out there. A little miscommunication. He's gone. It's funny because Mike McDaniel, one of the big knocks on Tua, right, was arm strength and like how far can he throw it. Well, with Tyreek Hill, there isn't a quarterback in the league, not even Josh Allen, who won't now and then not get, have him have to slow down. Because when Tyreek gets straight line running, before you know it, he's 75, 80 yards down the field, and there isn't a quarterback in the league who's going to throw it 80 yards in stride. So he has to kind of position himself to slow down to catch passes, and he and Tua have been working on that. Hey, I raise my hand, I'm open. Just throw it up there, and I'll go get it, even if I have to wait a little. One of the touchdowns, this weekend out of the 6, he had to slow down a bit. But then again, who's going to throw a ball 75 yards down the field? So he has changed their offense, and he's even more of a weapon than I thought he would be. And I thought he would be an incredible weapon as he's been the last few years.
Yeah, I could tell you this. The Bills were obsessed with Tyreek Hill because of what he did for Kansas City against them. If you think back to that great playoff game a year ago, it was after the Bills had taken the lead with a minute to go, not the 13 seconds, even though he made a play there, where he caught a slant and the safety for the Bills, Jordan Poyer, great player, took a half a step forward, and it was over.
That's it.
It was over. And I was talking to a friend of mine, he's a big Chiefs fan, and he was saying, well, we can replace the production. And I think you can with enough players. You can replace all those numbers. But that speed, I'm with you on that. That speed is unreal when you watch him on the field. And every second, that defensive coordinator and that secondary is thinking about Tyreek Hill. I think that just changes the entire offense for them.
It does, and it's also changed the confidence, I think, of Tua and the mindset of Tua. Last year, you look at the upgrade. This isn't to knock Devontae Parker, but their top guy, Jalen came in and had a great season, was Devontae Parker. Devontae's a contested catch guy. He's a big guy, but he's not a fast guy. So he's more of a guy you got to trust back shoulder throws, throw it up, have him go get it. There's a little bit of a difference as a quarterback to have the confidence to make those tight window throws, and you don't want to make the mistake. And a lot of times, because of that, Tua would throw it, be a little off, get tipped, get picked off. With Tyreek Hill, it's like you're just throwing it in space, and he's going to go get him. Or you hit him on a quick slant, and he's gone. And on top of having Waddle on the other side, it's they call themselves like these two muscle type cars, a Maserati, Ferrari, whatever the heck you want to call it. And it's true though, Mike. When you watch him play, it's true. That's why I think the Dolphins aren't necessarily there where the Bills are as a team yet. There's still a lot of areas that they need to improve. But I think the one area they clearly upgraded this offseason was they sort of are catching up at least to having weapons and being able to score. Because if you can't score against Buffalo in a game and Josh Allen gets rolling, you're going to get destroyed, which is something that would often happen to the Dolphins teams in the last few years.
So let's go back to the game on Sunday. Great comeback, great fourth quarter, Tua and everybody. But they were down, and they were down big. And defensively, they had some issues, certainly against Lamar, who can make anybody look bad. Where do you think this Dolphins defense, I know it's 2 weeks into the year, where do you think this defense is right now?
Well, I think number one is, they have Xavier Howard, who actually had a bad game the other day, which is rare for X. He's one of the best corners in the NFL. But missing Byron Jones on the other side, he's on the PUP list until, through the first 4 weeks of the season. They've been trying to kind of patch together that second corner and, nickel and how they do things. And I think X, and he said it before the opener of the season, is that, he's probably going to have to do a little more. I think maybe that, I don't want to say pressure, but that now that it's on him, on his plate, is a lot more to deal with. Because before you have a guy like Byron Jones, who's in his own right a damn good corner, now X kind of feels more responsibility. But still, you got a great corner there. I think the pass rush, they have to pressure the quarterback, and they couldn't get to Lamar. Part of it is Lamar's escapability and the way he recognizes things. That's why he's one of the best. And I think, unfortunately, when you play the Bills from a Dolphins perspective, Josh Allen falls into the same category. He's a big guy who can kind of navigate his way, push guys around, get around, edge rushers and linebacker blitzes and all this stuff. I think the Dolphins have to pressure the quarterback. I think they have to get to the quarterback more often, because when they don't, it's leaving guys out on islands. Guys are finding space. And it's a problem. It's a problem. And in this case, it was a problem because Lamar can run. In Josh Allen's case, obviously, could also be a problem if he gets space and he wants to run. But I think more so in just they've got to find a way to get to the quarterback and start pressuring quarterbacks, because right now, the way the defense is, it's not built to sustain 4, 5, 6 seconds downfield. Big plays will happen from the opposing team.
Yeah, we've seen Allen be able to do that. You mentioned him a couple of times, Mike McDaniel. Seems like a unique guy. Has an interesting way of expressing things, which I enjoy listening to him. What has he been like? What do you think he's brought to the franchise?
Well, I think confidence that he believes in them, like he believes in his players. And I think part of that, a lot of times the personality of a head coach, right, becomes the personality of the team. And if it doesn't, then that doesn't work. And I think I liked Brian Flores. I got along with Flo. I thought Flo was a good coach. I think if he gets a shot at the NFL again as a head coach, I think he could do a good job. But Flo wasn't easy. I mean, Flo came from that Belichick tree, and he came from that style. And part of the knock of the Belichick guys is they try to be like him personality-wise. And I think sometimes that just isn't for every player. Where McDaniel, the one thing that impressed me the most about Mike McDaniel, he gets hired. We all meet him. And look, day one, we've all been there. You've covered enough coaches. You love the coach day one, right? He's going to say all the things. And the person. And then as time goes on, you start to learn more about him. And what I liked about McDaniel in training camp is that watching him in camp be a head coach, he would go over to each player, take a knee next to him if the player's on the sideline, put his arm around the guy, go face to face and talk. And he made it a point to really get to know guys and see what their questions were, what their concerns were. How can I make you better? What are your strengths? What can we do to make you better? I think every player has taken a liking to that, hey, man, I know he's got to coach 53 guys. I know he's got to devise game plans and think about timeouts and think about going forward in situational football. But he takes time to really care about what I want, what I want to be and do. And I think players appreciate that. The main part of it. So he's cerebral, he's bright, he's sarcastic as hell. I mean, he's a jokester. He's a different kind of unique guy, but it's a refreshing personality. It's kind of and it's definitely the opposite of what Brian Flores was. And sometimes when you make a big change like that, suddenly, sort of what you need.
Yeah, it's a different world, certainly for athletes now, and the way they look at coaching. I use this quote all the time. It's not his, but he used it, is Brian Dabel, now the Giants coach, who used to say, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And you see him building relationships. And Sean McDermott's a different type of guy, but he absolutely is consistent into who he is. They know who he is.
Yeah.
And he's allowed guys to be themselves, right? Sean comes from the Andy Reid tree, but he's allowed his coordinators to really work with the quarterbacks. But he allows Stephon Diggs to be Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen to be himself. And they respect the head coach. They know where he's coming from. But even last night, we had this now going back to Monday night, the injury to Dane Jackson. And you can hear it in Sean McDermott's voice. He's thinking of the man, not the football player, because there's an ambulance out there to pick him up. And sometimes coaches get caught up in their own world and they forget that. And it's interesting to see McDaniel connect with his players in that way. And they'll play for a guy who does that for them.
Yeah, and they play hard. They believe in him. And look, there will be bumps in the road. It's great. They're 2-0. They're playing well. They 6 touchdowns. Great comeback. This week could be where they're brought down to earth. Buffalo's maybe the best team in the NFL right now. They know that. They know the challenge ahead. I don't think it would be that discouraging if they lose the game. I just think it's how they play. Can they really get closer to manning up against Buffalo? I think that's a big question. When you looked at the first 4 games of the season and you knew you had New England, no matter how down they are, a division rival, a team that's given you problems with Belichick defense in the past, then you got to go to Baltimore, face an MVP in Lamar Jackson. Then you got to face probably this year's MVP potentially and this year's potential Super Bowl team. And the next week they get the Bengals, who I know are up and down. And so far it's been a bad year, but they're a team that last year was in the Super Bowl. And you got Joe Burrow. So that 4-game stretch to open the season was going to tell us a lot about how this team would respond with Mike McDaniel. And so far, they're 2 for 2. I would say they've responded pretty well. And that's a good sign for what McDaniel's tried to do the whole offseason.
I want to go back to the rivalry. And let's start with Tua. He has not had good games against the Bills. And again, it was different coaching staffs and all. He's had moments where they were ready to see him do something, and he didn't play well. I think he's 0-3, 50% passer, only a single touchdown pass. From that perspective, because Josh Allen struggled with this early going against New England, the team he had to beat. From an individual player perspective with Tua, not just he's got to prove every week that he can be the guy, but how important you think it is for him, win or lose, to show up and play well against the Bills?
Yeah, very. I think that it's a huge step in his development of what he can be. You talked about Josh and dealing with the Patriots. It's funny because Josh, even those couple of years where he was, like you mentioned, he wasn't there yet, he still had success against the Dolphins. This defense has had a hard time controlling. I remember games where he's running around like a madman at Hard Rock Stadium, even in his first and second year in the league. And two, we haven't seen that against Buffalo. And you got to play your best right against the great teams, especially the teams within your division. That's a big step. And look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think the Dolphins are going to go at home and beat the Bills. And I think that they're the better team. I don't. I think the Bills are clearly on paper the better team, the experience, the overall talent. But I think for Tua and this team to make that next step, they got to show they're at least sort of in the class, right? It can't just be where they go out there and Tua throws 3 picks and all of a sudden the narratives start again. And I mentioned earlier how Tua doesn't care about those narratives, like at least on the outside, but on the inside, he's not dumb. He knows if he goes out and the Dolphins lose this game 40-17 and he's 50% passing, throws a couple picks, doesn't have anything going on offense, that everybody's going to say, see, it's Tua's inconsistent. He can't beat the quality teams, blah, blah, blah. And you're right back to square one after a 6-touchdown game the week before.
Yeah, that can happen too. I'm always fascinated by this because I think we've talked about, I don't think 2 markets could be any more different than the Buffalo market and the Miami market. I mean, Bills fans are locked in basically 11 and a half months a year to this team. And I don't know what they're doing the other few weeks. Have the Dolphins gotten the attention of the Miami sports fan?
It's almost there, and I referenced about, growing up here. I moved here in 85. I was 10 years old and everything in this town was Dolphins. That's all there was. I mean, you had the Hurricanes too, beginning their heyday. They already won a national title and they were, dominating the 80s in college football. But you didn't have the Marlins. You didn't have the Heat. You didn't have the Panthers. The Dolphins were this town. That's all they were. And then over time, they kind of disappeared because of the inconsistencies and being a 500 and mediocre team and some awful seasons too on top of that, all post Marino. It's been a work in progress. It doesn't help them that the Heat have gone out and won 3 championships and, played for 3 or 4 others and been to the finals a bunch of times and had the big 3. The Heat kind of took over this town. So to answer your question, I've always told people the same thing. I would love to just be in this town when the Dolphins are good and mattered, because I'm 47 years old. And in my lifetime, the Dolphins have never won a Super Bowl. Their last Super Bowl was 1973. Their last Super Bowl win. They haven't been to a Super Bowl since the 80s. So when you look at what they are, this town is desperate for the Dolphins to be good. So right now, it's like on a scale where this is like, euphoria and craziness, and this is like nobody cares. The Dolphins have worked their way up to like here, and everybody's just dying to jump into here. But they got to win games like this. They've got to be a contender. They've got to make the playoffs and make some noise before it reaches that level again. And people are desperate to get there. They just don't want to get burned. There's a saying here, Mike, it's same old Dolphins. People are like, that's the same old Dolphins. Same old Dolphins. People don't want the same old Dolphins, and they're hoping this is not the same old Dolphins.
Yeah. Well, the Bills heard that for a long time. As much as people love the franchise, there was a long time where it was like same old Bills until they finally started to turn it around. Crowd-wise, because Bills fans travel, and there'll be some coming down. First of all, they were just out in L.A. It was 97 in L.A. when we were out there. What are we looking at, 80s for Miami this weekend?
Well, let's hope it's not raining, right? And that the key to Miami is that it's not like a monsoon, because you could get those afternoon rains, and it's been pretty dry of late. But yeah, I mean, Mike, it's hot. I mean, I went out to the Hurricanes opener and the Dolphins opener, which were back-to-back days a couple of weeks back, and it's brutal. I mean, you walk into the parking lot of the stadium, it's 90 degrees. It's 90 degrees, and it's that humidity, and like your shirt, you feel it dripping down. So. And look, I'm sure you saw that the Patriots actually came up on Monday to train in West Palm Beach, about an hour north of here, to try to get used to the humidity. But I've lived here my whole life, and I'm still not used to the humidity. I can only imagine football players in those pads. I mean, the Dolphins do in that case have the advantage. They practice in it every day, but it's brutally hot. It's just still that time of the year where it's just 88 to 92 degrees with incredible humidity. And it's tough. It's tough to navigate through those games, especially a tough game in the second half. Which team has the ability to kind of sustain that energy, because it'll drain you.
Yeah. Do you think it's an advantage for the Dolphins at all? Because people here will always say when it's cold weather, I always say no one likes to play in the cold and the snow. Yeah. Some guys just get through it, but they're in it every day. And while it's been, it was hot in LA, they played the game. There was actually humid out there, which is an odd thing. Yeah. It's starting to cool down here. Do you think it's an advantage? Do they notice that it's an advantage early in the year?
Historically, the Dolphins are very good in September, at home. I mean, that's just, and it's part of early season team finding its way. And then they come to this heat. Historically, the Dolphins have been very good, even during down years, even in their, 10, 15-year span of being an 8-8 team. they found ways to start off well and play good. So yeah, historically, I think there is something to it. And I think part of it is that I think you can't ignore the connection that heat just drains teams. Now, it's much more impactful on a team that's mediocre or not that good than it would be on a team that's really good. So you would think a team like the Bills could handle that, but I think there is an advantage there. If this game is close and the Dolphins are used to this every day to practice in this heat, they get, their bodies are accustomed to it. Sure, it's a definite advantage. I don't think it's the difference in the game, but it's definitely an advantage for the Dolphins.
Yeah, it's funny you said close. The Bills have lost their all 5 close games last year, but they have now won 20, their last 20 regular season wins have all been by 10 points or more. Wow. And I think it was like the 1942 Bears. It is interesting. We were joking saying they can't win the close games. Well, maybe they're not going to play any, at least so far. But they are banged up as this week goes on. We'll see who's out there for the Bills and who's out there for the Dolphins. But I think it's going to be great. I'm happy the rivalry's back. I'm happy you were able to be with us to give us the insight on what's going on in Miami. And I mentioned a little bit at the beginning, let people know where they can find you, where they can listen to you, and let them get ready for coming down to Miami this week.
Well, listen, if you're a Bills fan or a Dolphins fan, mostly a Bills fan, you could always come talk on Twitter. I always love chatting with sports fans and debating topics. At Will Manso is my Twitter handle. And then for those locally, if you like the Dolphins, like you said, Clay and I have our sports pod. It's on our website, local10.com. It's called the Miami Sports Pod. And we pretty much just break down all South Florida sports. So it's always fun. It is fun to chat with you, Mike. And again, I'm glad it matters because I think the last few years, let's face it, the Dolphins haven't mattered. As the Bills have become that elite, to Super Bowl contending team, the Dolphins have been trying. And I think this is a big step. So it's going to be fun to see how this weekend goes.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. We will see you down there. Will Manso, thanks for being with us. And thanks to all of you for being with us. Again, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you the next time on Buffalo Plus, brought to you by Connors and Ferris.